All right, welcome to another episode of A Sacred Call to Action. My name is Reverend John Marc Ormechea. I'm here with Enfys Book, and we are here to explore their new book, Queer Rites, which is a groundbreaking book that brings magic, ritual, and clear liberation into a powerful conversation. Queer Rites is more than a grimoire. It's a sacred guide to reclaiming the milestones often denied to queer people. From name changes to coming out, gender transitions to chosen family celebrations, Enfys offers rituals that center healing, affirmation, and spiritual sovereignty, drawing on diverse magical traditions, including planetary energies, tarot, Qabala, and queer ancestor veneration. This book empowers queer folks to mark life's passages with pride, intention, and power. So, whether you're a seasoned witch or a cult practitioner, a newcomer or lover of the power of ritual, or a justice seeker looking for spiritual grounding, this book invites you into a practice that is deeply personal and radically political. It's a manual of self love, a toolkit for transformation, and a celebration of queer resilience. But before we get started, Enfys is the author of the Gold Cover Award winning Queer Qabala, co author with Ivo Dominguez Jr. of Sagittarius Witch, and author of the book that we're talking about today, Queer Rites, a magical grimoire to honor your milestones with pride. They are a high priestess of the Fellowship of the Ancient White Stag, Coven near Washington, D.C., and Enfys has taught classes on magical practice around the world. They are the creator of majorqueerna.com, a website devoted to queer magical practice with a focus on Qabala, and a host of podcasts called Four Quick Cues, Book Talk with Enfys, where they interview pagan authors using questions determined by the roll of the dice. Enfys, thank you so much for being here. Before we get started, is there anything else you'd like to say to introduce yourself today?
That was pretty comprehensive. So let's just roll with that and get to the questions.
Awesome. Well, let's really get right into the central of your book, which was incredible, by the way. Um, why do you believe ritual is such a powerful tool for queer self-discovery and healing in the first place?
This is such, your questions are amazing. I'm so excited to answer because they really get into the depth of what this book is about. So, for me, ritual is such a powerful tool because we approach ritual with intentionality. Ritual is something you do as you step into your own power. Ritual is something you do by choice, where you create a structure to make your magic happen within a container, and you call in different powers to assist you. Rituals are a space for meditation, for connection, and for emotional processing. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that later because that's a really critical component of it. But at the end of the day, ritual is a profound tool for claiming the sacredness of identity. And that's what I really wanted to get at with this series of rituals and also the introduction that helps you craft your own rituals to whatever your needs are.
Awesome. Yeah. You also say that your own name change ritual is a turning point, emotionally, spiritually, and magically. Can you walk us through how that experience helped you understand the gaps in institutional rites of passage?
Absolutely. So, like many who experienced the COVID cocoon at the end of 2020, I had known I was non-binary for several years at that point, but I really hit a point of, okay, I really need to change my name because I feel like my name is holding me back from fully being able to step into my true identity as a non-binary person. And so I chose the name after a lot of deliberation, and then I looked down the long, long list of steps that I had to accomplish to legally change that name. And even in a very trans-friendly state like Maryland, it was a beast of a list. And I'm so, so lucky I got to work with an organization called Trans Maryland, where a big part of what they do is help trans people change their names, because especially during the height of the pandemic, all the old rules were out the window and it wasn't always clear what the next steps were. So there are a million little bureaucratic things I had to do, but none of those little bureaucratic steps were like, ta-da, your name is changed and you know it now in your soul. It's now part of you officially. Like they are all just little bits and none of them kind of added up to the sum of their parts, you know?
Sure.
So I knew as a magical practitioner that a ritual was what I needed to do that, to attach that name to myself on a spiritual level, but I had no idea where to start writing one. I kind of was like, I had been writing public ritual for maybe 8 years at this point, so the fact that I was stymied was sort of took me by surprise. And so I reached out to one of the elders of my tradition, Robin Fennelly, and was like, help. And Robin came through in a huge way for me. She delivered me a fully written ritual with astrological timing that worked with my specific natal chart transits and a sigil for the name that I could use in the ritual. And it was phenomenal. And it really made me step back and think, wow, this is amazing. And I did that ritual the day after my 41st birthday when there was an eclipse and there was like just a whole bunch of great stuff going on astrologically for a big change like this. And I thought, wow, why doesn't everyone have a Robin in their life
Yeah,
to be able to help them with this? And then it made me think more broadly about rites of passage, not only in the magical community, but in the queer community and kind of in society at large. And you think about what do we have out there and how is it treated culturally within mainstream culture? And usually rites of passage at this point we're not really good at sitting in the profundity of those changes as a
sure.
culture. Uh, you see this a lot with like as people age and the greeting card selection gets more and more cruel.
Yeah,
Like, oh, you're over the hill, you're gonna die soon. Like we're not good at like acknowledging and sitting with the idea of elderhood for one thing, just as an example. Getting married, like yes, there's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but how much of that is driven by capitalism?
yeah,
And greed and keeping up appearances and it's not really about the actual event. It's more about a cultural script that maybe doesn't actually serve its purpose anymore. So so that is those are the conclusions I came to, and I really thought, wow, we need something like the book I ended up writing. With the queer community needs it, the magical community needs it. We need this wake-up call about how vital rites of passage are to acknowledge in a meaningful and personal way, not just a commercial way or a cruel or funny way.
sure, sure. Yeah, and to your point, to everyone needs a Robin in their life. I think you do a great job in this book, especially at the beginning, because like, as someone who like dove into occult work a little before the pandemic, you look at these old grimoires and they all have these planetary alignments, right? And the time of
Mhm.
day and the actual day to make everything align as much as possible. And you do such a great job of bringing that, making that accessible to people. Speaking of accessibility, you emphasize that many rituals in queer rites are accessible, requiring like minimal tools, and often can be done by yourself. Why was this accessibility so vital to your design, in the book?
I really wanted to reach as many people as possible, and I do definitely take to heart the idea that the revolution will be intersectional or it is not a revolution at all. Our liberation is only liberation if it frees everybody.
Amen.
And so if I had written this book only to be accessible to those who could afford really fancy tools or those who were able-bodied or otherwise very privileged, it wouldn't be radical, it wouldn't be transformative, and it wouldn't reach the members of our community who most critically need the kind of healing that can come from an intentional sacred rite of passage. So it was very important to me from the jump as I was conceiving of this is like, okay, we have to be able to do this with a minimal amount of stuff. And also making sure that people of different physical abilities could do these rituals, having adaptations where it makes sense. And for people who don't have a group they work with, I think that's the most common type of pagan in the world are ones who are
Sure.
solo practitioners. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a group, or if they have a group, maybe this isn't something they want to experience with a group because it's highly personal and vulnerable work.
Sure. Speaking of the vulnerability, you write about the emotional pain as fuel for transformation. How do
Mhm.
you balance that deep vulnerability with the need for safety and ritual?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and not only pain, but also joy can be fuel for the ritual. But strong emotions are fantastic fuel for magic. It's anything that really gets us into a strong focused place. And so that's one of the reasons that almost every ritual in this book is written specifically for an individual rather than a group, although there are adaptations for many of them to do them with a group, because I really want people to be able to experience these in a way where they're not self-conscious. And I personally grew up in the Midwest of the United States, where let's just say we were not taught the best ways to express emotions in front of other people, that was not an encouraged thing to do in my culture. So for me, if I'm going through something where I may break down crying for an extended period, I will be more likely to actually have that emotional release if I am by myself than
Sure,
if I have a group of people where I'm like, oh gosh, are they judging me? Are they bored? Are they worried this is going on too long? If I have those thoughts going through my head, I'm not actually experiencing the transformation that I need to.
sure.
So yeah, it was really important, and I do offer those adaptations with a group, but I do caution people that like it's important to choose who you're going to do that work with. Like the people who will let you be fully yourself and vulnerable in your life. It's very important to do this with a group where you feel extremely emotionally safe with. And in addition to that, for the ones done solo, I always recommend people have an aftercare plan.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if you're going to go through something that may be kind of emotionally wrenching, like a funeral for your dead name is one of the rituals, and that can pack a bit of a punch because maybe it's being fueled by a lot of, frustration and rage about people just not accepting your new name, and you're going to have a lot of energy moving toward the goal of removing that name as much as possible from yourself. So afterwards, you want to make sure that if you don't have the privilege of having maybe formal mental health care in your life, at least having a friend who is aware that you are doing this ritual and that you may want to talk afterwards, maybe having a plan for like some comfort TV and a squishmallow hug or hanging
yeah.
with your pets or a favorite snack or something, giving yourself space not only during the ritual to feel the feelings, but after.
Yeah, I really appreciate throughout the book you talk about mental health. That magic is not a substitute for therapy, right? That this is not something that, which I think is really important because I feel like we live, especially in this kind of Western world, in this hyper individuality place where we are, when people find themselves either in a certain pagan organization or the cult, it's like, oh, this is what I need to get myself right, right?
Hmm.
And it's not
Hmm.
like a replacement for that deep one-on-one exploration with a therapist or that communal care that we often
Right.
find in like queer and punk communities.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
uh, so your rituals invite participants to experience that sovereignty,
Hmm.
that you belong to you, which I think is really beautiful. How do you see this concept of sovereignty reshaping queer mental and spiritual health?
I think just looking at the world around us right now in mid 2025, there are a lot of people in power trying to deny us that sovereignty. There are people trying to take away accessibility to life-saving healthcare, specifically from trans people and people of color. There are people erasing queer people from public life and documents. People removing the trans contributions to Stonewall, for God's sakes, which like is just so
Wild.
horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are denying our right to exist as we are, or they're trying to, and that is terrifying. So I think now more than ever, it is vital that we claim ourselves and to say in a ritual context, especially, but also in daily life, that only we get to decide who we are. We have to be self-empowered in that way to have the energy and the confidence to fight on behalf of others and on behalf of ourselves in these times.
I really think it's important because that kind of leaning as much into our authenticity as possible. I preached a sermon once where I encouraged all of the cishet people to come out of the closet
Hmm.
because not out of their queerness, but like just to allow
Yeah.
themselves to be ourselves, right? We have
Hmm.
sacrificed so many bits of ourselves, and queer folks have are blessed, I would say, with the opportunity to be able to actually fall into that with all of the messiness that that entails, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But at least we can stand up and say like if we in the safety if we have it that this is who I am and I'm not going to
Hmm.
hold these bits back for you anymore. I'm not going to sacrifice my love for myself for your comfort. And that's one of the things you actually really do within this book. You help queer people claim identity and release the social conditioning. So in your view, what is the political power of such personal ritual and like releasing that social conditioning?
Yeah, well, one thing what you were just saying reminds me of is I just have it on the wall next to me. I have this next to me when I work is a bunch of quotes from Alok. And
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of them is, "What a blessing to be misunderstood. Proof that authenticity is where you call home." And that one just hit me like a train when I read it the first time. And looking at that blessing, like you talk about, that we have this urge toward authenticity, that some people do not take advantage of that, and it's a shame. But ultimately, the political power of these kinds of personal rituals, we're telling the government, those in power, those who hate us, that they don't get to define us. You don't get to define me. You don't get to put shame on me. I am myself. I decide who I am. And that terrifies people in power. They want control. They want us weak. They want us hurt. They want us confused. And if we accept their shame and internalize it, will not be shining brightly. We're not going to be a beacon to others. We're not going to be giving others permission to be themselves. Confidence and self assuredness are contagious, and they know it. And that is why when we see others like us proudly being themselves, it tells us that's okay. And that is why they're trying to censor books and other media and remove representation, because they understand how powerful that is. I didn't have the language for my gender until maybe 10 years ago.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
know the word non-binary. That didn't exist. It was just always this background itchiness I couldn't quite define or explain. And when I started seeing people who identified that way, I'm like, oh, I get myself better now. And that's the power we have right now. Not that I mean, everyone has to look after their own safety, of course, but for those who can and are willing to be that beacon for other people and say, look at me, I am living proudly, I am living here. It's a beautiful thing.
It really is. Language is so important too, like when I think about
Mm.
ritual and magic in general. But you're right, like growing up, like we didn't have words like pansexuality, for example.
Right, right.
Or like we had bisexuality, I guess, but like or even when we could break down different levels like gynosexuality, things like that, where like
Hmm.
it just further defines your personal experience in ways that you weren't able to before. And when we're given that language, we're able to give language to ourselves to unlock those pieces. Like
Hmm.
all of a sudden you're like, oh, as someone who grew up not feeling incredibly masculine or male,
Hmm.
like for me, I'm just like, what I don't feel necessarily female or necessarily
Hmm.
ultra feminine. I just know that I'm not quite fitting in the performance that people expect of me, right?
Hmm.
And so then we have non-binary coming out as a word, right? Or agender or gender
Or
fluid. Yeah, yeah.
xenogender is one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like all of those are keys that unlock doors to just let us feel okay in our own skin. Like, oh, I'm not alone, like, oh, someone else experiencing this.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and not everyone's pumped when we experience these things. So, some of the rituals that you have in here invite participants to sever ties with unsupported family, or people
Hmm.
maybe we even call friends, right? Honor the death of a dead name. Um, how do these private sacred acts contribute to a broader justice work and collective liberation?
Yeah, and I gotta say the ritual to sever ties is one, at least the introduction to it, I felt I needed to write very carefully, because severing a connection that is important to you is always, it's never a step to be taken lightly, right? And I recommend where possible making that decision with the help of other people in your life who care about you, whether that's a mental health professional, close friends, something along that line, a mentor. So you're not just acting in the heat of a moment. But there are times when, for our own mental health and safety, we have to step back from people who are actively doing us harm. And so the sort of where that fits in with broader justice work and collective liberation is that we have to focus our energy where it matters most. And if I'm spending all my time and energy trying to change or convince people who want nothing to do with my true self, that's time and energy better spent toward working toward collective justice and surrounding myself with people who would build me up and give me the strength that I need to do
Yeah.
that work.
Yeah. And I think about I had to sever ties with parts of my family. And I think about all of the creative potential that unlocked
Hmm.
just because I'm not holding that energy someplace. I'm not spending time thinking about that as much as I have to. I'm sacrificing myself less and less for others around me.
Hmm.
And my friend Brad put it away. He goes, when you come out, it's telling people that you're no longer going to keep the filters on that you had before, right?
Right.
Um, and sometimes those filters are people. And
Hmm.
so sometimes those for us to live and be healthy emotionally, physically, sensually, all those things have to be kind of trimmed away sometimes.
Yeah. It's a really hard decision to make. And there is also a corollary ritual in the book for re-inviting those connections after some time has passed if it seems like maybe someone's changed their mind or maybe you're in a different place where, this connection's still important to you and you want to
and
forge that, but you want to do it with healthy boundaries and not you want to make peace but not at the expense of your own peace,
yeah,
you know? So I really wanted to make sure kind of both sides of that experience are in there because sometimes it goes both ways.
I think that part two is really important when you said leaving room for people who change their mind.
Hmm.
We are currently in a very cancel, people are not capable of growth culture,
Hmm.
for good and bad. But really, in a sense, for those relationships that we're talking about, it could be in a very negative way. Like
Hmm.
maybe people can't realize the the lack of understanding they have until they've hurt someone that they care about, right?
Right.
And that allows them to explore things they might not have before intentionally.
Hmm.
Before it was just, oh, it doesn't make sense to me. It goes against the way I was raised, right?
Right.
Um, to moving to a place like, what does it matter how you dress? Or what does it matter what you do in the privacy of your own life, right?
Right.
Just like
Hmm.
everybody else. And so leaving those connections open is really powerful whenever it's possible. Um,
Hmm.
but moving on, we talk about invoking our queer ancestors.
Hmm.
Folks like Marsha P. Johnson, Audre Lorde, Sylvia Rivera. How do rituals help us build bridges between personal healing and ancestral justice?
Yeah, one of my friends who's been on the show before, Reverend Ron Padron, can speak to this much more eloquently than I can, and is one of my mentors in this specific area of ancestor veneration, specifically queer ancestor veneration. I think it's important for every queer person to realize that your ancestry isn't just the people related to you through your family of origin, that you are part of an ancestral stream of affinity as well, and many of those streams of affinity. So, like every other queer person who's existed throughout history is connected to you, and everyone that will exist in the future is connected to you. And by tapping into that stream of power, we can learn from those who've come before and continue to speak their truths to the world in the same breath as our own. And one of the things that I do to help build that bridge between personal healing and ancestral justice is I encourage folks when they invoke or call in that energy and ritual to consider doing some advocacy work or making a contribution in that ancestor's name, so that their legacy can continue making a difference in the queer community today and they are completely remembered and that their work continues even though they've passed beyond the veil.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things Ron taught me a few years ago is that our ancestors are not tied to our bloodline, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
how many doors that opens. And I would say our elders are also not tied to our bloodline in a similar way. So like when I think of Deke Nielsen and Vaginal Davis, for example, are massive influences in my life.
Hmm.
And it will be difficult for me when they pass on to the next. But those are all resources and sources of wisdom that we can
Hmm.
tap into and find strength in, which is just incredibly powerful.
And also, even within your family of origin, if you go back, you have queer ancestors. They may not have been able to
Yeah.
use that language or may not have been known as that, but you definitely are related to queer people at
Yeah,
some stage. So that is a stream of power you can tap into, but it's sometimes it's less painful and easier to focus on, the queer advocacy ancestors, and it's a stronger stream
sure.
of power in some cases.
Yeah, versus say wrestling with your queer ancestors who wrestled with themselves, right?
Right.
What does it look like to have someone in the 1800s, 1700s, and well, further back it might be a little easier, but like in the middle of
Hmm.
those areas when we have this kind of Roman colonialism and British colonialism and all these things, it gets more muddied because all of a sudden you have the cultural erasure in different areas of the world saying like, no, that's not okay, and we're going to beat it out of you, right? And so,
Right.
how many of our ancestors had that beaten out of them and different things like that?
Or were erased from history books or family
Yeah,
genealogies or whatnot. Yeah.
yeah. So you incorporate a lot into your personal practice. So you incorporate Kabbalah, tarot, astrology, planetary energy into your rituals. How do those layered systems amplify rituals healing or activist potential?
Yeah. So part of my philosophy of what makes a ritual work is you want to layer as many appropriate correspondences as possible that have meaning and resonance to you. I'm clear with people like if you don't work with deities, don't don't like do that. You don't have to. That's not something you have to incorporate into your ritual. If Hermetic Kabbalah is not your jam at all, there's no reason you have to incorporate that. But maybe you're into numerology or herbalism, and those are things I really wanted to have more robust correspondences in the book, but it would have been so much longer and taken so much longer to release. So I really invite people, whatever correspondences make sense to you in your practice, please layer those in. So in sort of the same way when you're developing an activism campaign, that it helps to have allies with different skill sets and different powers from different
Sure.
sources. It's the same thing when you're constructing a ritual. Like you want to tap into a variety of streams of power that can amplify the work that you're doing. So each added layer is an additional bolster to the energy. So maybe that looks like, hey, I'm doing something that relates to my health. I'm going to put a green altar cloth down because that's one of the things that tells my brain that this is related to an earthly sort of element and relates to my health in that way. And then maybe I'm going to put 10 little tea lights around because the number 10 resonates with wholeness and healing to me, and also represents Malkut in the Hermetic Kabbalah, which is related to manifestation. So the more things that you add like that, the more potent your working will be, partly because it gives your brain a lot of different cues for things to tap into, but it also calls those energies out to become part of your ritual.
Sure, sure. I love this idea of making it even that person more personal with the things that you couldn't add.
Hmm.
Because that could be like even like people's egregores and things like that that they
Yeah.
experienced, or the spirits of the land that they work upon, right? Those types of things.
Sure. Like I wanted to include every possible pantheon, but again, it's sort of the limits of like, here's what I already know, and here's what I have time to research before this
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
out.
yeah.
And I also didn't want to, step on any culturally appropriative things that I don't have enough knowledge to speak to, kind of
Sure.
thing. So I really make a point in the introduction, which a lot of times people don't read the introduction. So I will say, please, please make these rituals personalized to your specific context. That is what's going to make it more powerful rather than using the correspondences I wrote just because I wrote them in there.
Right, right. Um, Ritual work can be new to a lot of people.
Mm.
So what do you say to someone who's new to magic, but passionate about justice and seeking ways to spiritually ground their activism?
Start small. Um, Magical practice is an overwhelming field of study with a whole lot of different specializations available. And I think sometimes there's the temptation, especially early on, to just drink from the fire hose and take in as much information as you can. But one of the hard lessons to learn is that it's about the practice more than the reading. Like you should read, you should educate yourself, but also you need to do if you're going to actually make things work. So in this specific instance, I'd recommend people start working with queer ancestors as a way to bolster their justice work. Before you go out to a protest, do a meditation and call in Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Audre Lorde, whoever you most look up to, and ask for them to walk with you. In that protest, in that event. Ask for their wisdom to help get you through the day and make the best choices to protect yourself and your community. I really do commend Ron Padron's work on whiterosewitching.com has some amazing queer ancestor workings available. And it would be a wonderful place to start. He also has a Patreon now, so people can check out those resources as well.
Awesome. Um, Many rituals in this book are very personal, like the chosen family blessing and polyamorous hand fastings, but those kind of like invite community as well. So,
Right.
like, how can collective ritual become an act of resistance in itself?
Well, I think every ritual is an act of resistance, whether it's solo or a group, because magic has long been a way for the disempowered in our society, those without money or status, to gain power by tapping into the greater powers of the universe. So every ritual is an act of resistance because we're tapping into forces that are not capitalist, colonialist, patriarchal, etc. But by coming together as a group, we really amplify what we create. And when we celebrate queerness together, we share and enhance that collective joy. And in some rituals, collective sorrow. As they say, a shared joy is a joy doubled, and a shared sorrow is a sorrow halved. Coming together and celebrating with others, especially when other people are telling us we shouldn't celebrate these
Right,
things,
right.
that's part of denying those in power the right to shame us. And amplifying that by celebrating with community reminds us even more that, yeah, this isn't something to be shameful. This is who we are, and this is powerful, and it's sacred, and it's blessed.
Yeah, and I think um, I see a lot of overlap between queer history and punk history. And
Hmm.
a lot of those things, those are heavily based in community and heavily based
Hmm.
on the celebration and uplifting of each other in those kind of senses. And that's also like the power of like queer spaces,
Right.
or punk spaces where you essentially walk into a container that
Hmm.
was that was designed to allow you to be able to express who you are with your gender expression and the way that you speak and the way that you move, in ways that you can't other places. Like maybe some
Hmm.
people aren't don't have the safety to express them express how they feel at places like work, right, with their gender
Hmm.
expression. Or
Right.
what does it look like to be in spaces where you're able to say what you actually want to say instead of having to guard that fear for fear of a reaction that could, threaten your existential concerns, like your ability to take
Hmm.
care of yourself. Um, and so I think that that is just so powerful when we come together as a community. And I loved what you brought up, also the ability to like, before to ask an ancestor just to be with us in that moment, right?
Hmm.
And maybe not even just a place of protest, but also in those quiet moments when we're by ourselves contemplating things. And how do we
Yeah.
pull on their wisdom? Audre Lorde's a great example because of how deeply introspective she was, and
Hmm.
the number of intersections that she held throughout her time, and the amount of power or lack of power that she analyzed that she had in different spaces, for example. And so that is just
Right.
an incredible person to pull from.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
they can really be guides for our own queer journeys and journeys
yeah,
of self-understanding. And if nothing else, if you don't know what you want to say to them or whatnot, just light a candle in their memory, just have it on a table and say, hey, I'm just honoring you. Thank you for everything you did that has made my life better and made a lot of people's lives better. Please help me, walk in your footsteps and build on what you did.
yeah. Yeah, speaking of things that we have posted on the wall, I actually have a collection of people, queer and non-queer folks who have influenced me in multiple ways in my trajectory, and it has keep going on it because I know that they went through way harder shit than I've ever had to go through. So
Mhm.
it's like those are sources that we can pull from, and I think it's wonderful.
I have a tattoo on my ankle that it starts with my old band's logo, which is like a skull with hard eyes, and it has come out singing written around it, and a whole bunch of rainbows and musical notes. And to me, it's has multiple meanings. One is it's short for the phrase "I've been through hell and come out singing," which I think is such a powerful vision
Yeah,
for what we're going through right now, for
yeah,
when you're going through a hard time. It's also an invitation to come out
yeah,
singing and also just simply, hey, come out singing, express your joy, be joyful.
yeah.
And it's one of those profound reminders for me that not only have I been through some really awful times and come out singing, I've come out a better person who gets to enjoy life more than I did before I went through that hard time. But that me walking this path is an invitation to others to find that authenticity within themselves.
Yeah. Um, in a world where queer people often don't have access to traditional rites,
Mhm.
how do you hope that these ceremonies will create new spiritual cultures and communal memory?
I mean, I simply hope that they do. Though it's changed a lot since I was a teenager in the 90s, queer people are still operating largely without cultural scripts for how to celebrate and commemorate rites of passage, which means we often don't commemorate them or honor them, or the way we remember them is through the bad things that happened when we went through them. How many narratives have we seen of I came out, I lost my family, I lost my friends, and that's what defines that moment for me rather than I I came to a point of honesty with myself and it was a joyful thing, remembering it in that way. So I would love for 50 years from now for young queer people to be advised by their elders who are doing these rituals now in 2025. And for those elders to be even more self assured and grounded than they would have been without these rituals. And I'd love for them to tell the stories of how we defied the government that tried to erase us, how people without any queer friends were able to step into their first queer experiences with sacredness and profundity, and who found their queerness holy, not shameful, even in these times. That
And
would be my ultimate hope for this.
I think one thing that took me back while I was reading this book is I've come out in multiple ways, multiple times to different
Same.
people. Um, I never thought to think of it as like 16th birthday, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
getting married, or as this, and it struck me that we are already in a very fast world with our
Mm-hmm.
very capitalist driven. We need to make money to survive, and that means we're often moving more than we're thinking. And this book really says, "Oh no, this is a milestone in your life, and you should
Mm-hmm.
pause, and you should take the time to deeply acknowledge that and think about either the joy or grief that you're going through in this moment,
Mm-hmm.
which just allows you to walk away more full, just like we
Mm-hmm.
experience in different pagan or other ritual spaces. Um, like when I do a full moon ritual with my folks here in Lansing, um, I experience that in the fullness of my being, and it's because we step out of time into this liminal space that we've carved
Mm-hmm.
out for ourselves. Um, that goes with the cycle of the moon. But what's to stop us from doing that with all sorts of different things? What's to do that with a new relationship or a breakup? What's to do that with starting a new career or going back to school? All those different things. How can we I guess, do you see like just an infinite number of applications for ritual and allowing us to stop and slow down and kind of create space for those moments?
Absolutely. I mean, a rite of passage, if we're talking about those, is a liminal space in your life. It's a transition point between what was and what is and what will be. And so occultists know liminal spaces have an incredible amount of power. But I think ritual has the potential to to really, like you say, help us slow down, take a breath, acknowledge what is happening, and sit in that feeling and in that moment. Because I think the urge in our culture, especially you consider, if you're scrolling on TikTok or something, it's just this constant ingestion of different stimuli.
Yeah.
In some ways because we want to disassociate. We want to not be experiencing what we're experiencing right now. So it's incredibly radical to say, no, we're going to live in this moment right now and think about what's going on and feel what's going on. So, yeah, whether you are, building a ritual around, hey, it's Tuesday and I haven't done a ritual in a while and I don't know what I want to do, but I just feel this call to do it. Great. It gives you a margin in your life
Yeah.
where you can take a breath, pause, feel the energies around you, connect with the energies that are important to you, whether you work with spirit guides, whether you work with deities or, your land spirits or whatnot. Taking time to pause and do that, I can't think of a time when that would be bad. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can't think of a bad application of that.
Yeah, it's I over the past 2 years I've gotten better with like my work-life balance.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people probably need permission to slow down,
Yeah.
to take time for themselves and self-care. This radically crazy concept that if we're going to care for others, we should probably care about ourselves.
Hmm.
And so I think that that is also one of the benefits of like, you're right, on Tuesday, what if I have 15 to 30 minutes? What can I do in that 15 to 30 minutes that I wouldn't have otherwise?
I mean, I start every day with 5 minutes at my altar.
Yeah.
Like, that's time I can always afford. I sit there, I light some incense, I do some cleansing, I do some shielding, and I light candles for those in my life who need a little boost, who need some energy. And I just sit and listen for 5 minutes to see if any messages come through because sometimes my brain is so busy that I
Yeah.
don't take that time. So by forcing myself to do it every morning, I'm forcing that breath basically, like I am going to sit and breathe here even if it's only 5 minutes. It's something, and weaving that kind of ritual into day-to-day life is really helpful. Phoenix LaFay wrote this great book about, has written actually a couple really fantastic books on rituals, one of them co-written with her spouse Gwion Raven. One's called Life Ritualized and the other is called How to Write and Perform Rituals That Actually Work. And they're fantastic because they speak to sort of the broader context of rituals in a way that my book is very specific. But if you're interested in learning more about like ritual applications in life, those are some fantastic reads.
Awesome. Um, I know that this book started because you realized there's kind of this lack of these transitional moments that we make time for within our queer lives. How has writing queer rights changed your own relationship to healing and justice because of that?
Yeah. Well, and I also want to acknowledge I forgot to do this at the start, but
Yeah,
like there have been so many fantastic books on queer magic, which included rituals for rites of passage. So in many ways I stand on the shoulders of giants here, but what I wanted was one full grimoire of just rites of passage rituals, and including some I hadn't seen before, many I hadn't seen before. So shout outs to Cassandra Snow, Misha Magdalene, Ariana Serpentine, Storm Fairy Wolf. A lot of people have been writing incredible stuff in the queer magic realm. But in terms of how writing this has changed my own relationship to healing and justice, I mean, it's really deepened my appreciation for ritual in general, which is saying something because I was already hooked on ritual, like love it. I'm in a tradition that is very good at ritual and we do it very well. But also in the process of writing, it helped me see that there's such a wide array of rites of passage that queer people go through that aren't universally acknowledged as rites of passage.
yeah,
And that we have the opportunity to introduce the sacred into those experiences and approach them with intention. So, justice starts with our own individual actions, and healing starts with ourselves too. And incorporating ritual is just one way to contribute toward collective justice because the more of us who are empowered, whatever form that takes, the better.
yeah. I love that you were talking about how the revolution is going to happen. It's going to be intersectional, no
Hmm.
matter what that looks like, and that takes the education and empowerment of everyone around us, and that's incredible.
Yeah.
But I guess, so what are you dreaming about doing next? Virtually, politically, spiritually, either for yourself or for the queer magical world?
I mean, I'm loving seeing all the fantastic books that are coming out, pardon me, about queer magic, the ones I mentioned and many more. And I'd love to see those books get even more radical and justice oriented as those in power start swaying the other way. Like, if you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Let's go Obi-Wan Kenobi with this, right?
Yeah.
Uh, like, we're going to define five brand new genders every time someone complains about pronouns. Like, this is the direction we're going. I love like works like Alterpunk that you are part of. I love seeing this rise. Like Cassandra Snow has written or edited this compilation of like tarot and other words. I'm also looking at radical tarot, decolonized astrology. There's all kinds of really great work starting to bubble to the surface that is
Yeah.
heavily influenced by the punk movement and by intersectional revolution and all of that. I want to see more of that. I'm happy to be a small piece in that puzzle. I would like to contribute more, and I don't know what shape that's going to take, but I'm going to keep doing what I am called to do in this space. And also right now I am in a time of both focusing on personal advocacy and also self-care after I made the mistake of trying to write two books in the same year, and it has required a lot of recovery time.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I'm trying to honor that. It's funny. I wrote a piece in the Llewellyn Sabbath's annual about Yule as a time of radical rest. And I was a big fan of when I was on Instagram. I loved following the Nap Ministry, the concept of rest is radical, rest is revolutionary, rest is something that capitalism hates, and we need to embrace it. So I'm really focusing on balancing making sure I am advocating, taking actions, working toward justice, and also letting my creative spirit rest and recover for a while before I take on the next project. So I think, my my inner Sagittarius is all like, go, 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 you must do all the things all the time. And fortunately, the four Virgos in my chart are like, shh, honey, it's okay. Maybe take a break. It's all right. You can enjoy life for a bit. So yeah, just trying to balance those things, and I'm hoping that I will come to a place sooner rather than later where I feel rejuvenated and can start working on something even more radical and new.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this. This has been an incredible conversation. Um, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future after you take that rest for yourself.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to plug before we depart today?
Yeah, I mean, people can find me through my website, majorarqueerna.com. That's majorarqueerna.com. That's where you'll find links to what little social media I have at this moment, which is on Mastodon, PixelFed. I'm still on YouTube. But I also have a bridge account from my Mastodon to Blue Sky for people who are there, so you can at least see what I'm posting on Mastodon, even if you're not there. And all my upcoming events are there. I will be very busy during Pride, as one might imagine. Uh, there is an online virtual event June 11th. I'm not sure when this podcast will go live. But June 11th is Llewellyn Con is the day it starts, which is an online free virtual conference, and I'm doing a piece on queer rites of passage there. And if you register, you get a free sticker and can enter to win some awesome free books.
Very awesome. I'll have you send me
And
all the information and plug it down below so that everyone can pull that up.
yeah, that's great. And also just big shout out to public libraries. If you cannot afford to purchase books right now, please request it at your local public library. Or even if you can afford to purchase books, it's still really great to support our libraries and patronize them right now and keep them going because they're one of our most valuable resources and one of the only true socialist institutions in our nation. So please do so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. I appreciate your time.